They expected your silence to mean defeat. They thought, when you stopped calling, stopped explaining, stopped fighting, you'd fade. But they were wrong, because silence, in the hands of a man who has found himself, is not surrender. It's strategy. At first, they laugh. They convince themselves you're just playing games. They tell their friends, he'll come back. But days turn to weeks, and the silence they once mocked becomes unbearable. They replay every moment, every word, every mistake, because your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. Silence exposes everything they tried to hide. It reveals their insecurity, their dependence, their illusion of control. And the irony, the power they thought they had over you was only the power you kept giving them. Now it's gone, and they can feel it. You see, true silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning. It's the sound of boundaries being built. It's the sound of respect being reclaimed. And for those who fed off your energy, your silence is not peace. It's punishment. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you control your mind, nothing outside can disturb your peace." That's exactly what your silence represents, not revenge, but mastery. Stay with me, because in this video, I'll show you how your silence doesn't just unsettle them, it transforms you from reactive to untouchable, from noise to power, from chaos to command. What terrifies the manipulator isn't your anger, it isn't your words, it's your silence. Because silence is control, and control is something they never wanted you to have. See, when they could provoke you, they felt powerful. Every time you explained yourself, defended yourself, or reacted to their drama, you confirmed the story in their head that they still had access to your emotions. They could pull a string and you'd dance. They could withhold affection and you'd chase. That illusion of control was their comfort and your cage. But the moment you go silent, the story collapses. They lose the script. And for the first time, they have to face the terrifying truth. You're no longer inside their control. You've unplugged from the game. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's the redefinition of it. Every word you don't send. Every explanation you don't give. Every argument you walk away from it speaks louder than shouting ever could. It says, I no longer owe you access to my peace. That realization is devastating to those who fed off your energy, because people who thrive on control can't handle uncertainty. Your silence creates a vacuum, and that vacuum eats them alive. They start to question everything. Why isn't he reacting? Has he moved on? Did he see through me? Their mind becomes their own punishment, looping on 1,000 what-ifs. While you sit calm, untouched, and distant. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Your silence is that realization in motion. You stop chasing closure, because closure is just their bait to pull you back. You stop defending your worth, because your worth doesn't need an audience. You stop reacting, because nothing they do can reach you without your permission. And that's when they panic. Because the one thing people fear more than losing control over you is realizing they never had it in the first place. Understand this. Reaction is proof of attachment, and attachment is control. When you react to every insult, every manipulation, every emotional hook, you hand them the map to your inner world. You teach them how to reach your anger, how to trigger your insecurity, how to feed on your need for approval. But when you go silent, you flip the polarity. Now you are the mystery. Now they are the one wondering, and uncertainty is the most powerful form of consequence. Your silence becomes the mirror that reflects their own instability. They see themselves loud, disperati, spinning in noise while you stand calm, detached, and still, and that stillness feels like judgment, because it forces them to face the one thing: they can't manipulate your self-control. Make no mistake, silence is not retreat. It's redirection. It's the art of reclaiming energy that was being wasted on proving, pleasing, or persuading people who never intended to understand you. When you go silent, you're not losing communication, you're upgrading it. You've stopped speaking their language chaos. Now, you're fluent in composure. And composure confuses people who only understand conflict because they expect the noise. They're prepared for your reaction. They've rehearsed the argument in their head 100 times, but when you don't play the role they wrote for you, you force them to improvise, and improvisation exposes truth. Your silence breaks their illusion because it removes the stage, and without the stage, the actor falls apart. They can't perform without your attention, because your attention was the spotlight. Now, they're standing in the dark talking to themselves, performing for no one. And that's when fear sets in. Not fear of losing you, but fear of facing themselves. Because your silence doesn't just take away the conversation, it takes away their reflection. Without your reactions, they can't project their guilt, their chaos, their insecurity. They have to sit in it, alone. That's why silence is not weakness. It's the highest form of psychological strength. It's the ability to resist the most seductive impulse, the need to be understood. A weak man demands to be seen. A strong man is content being misunderstood because he knows who he is. Every time you stay silent, you are saying, I no longer explain myself to chaos. I no longer perform for validation. I no longer negotiate my worth with confusion. And that terrifies them because it means they can't reach you anymore. You've become sovereign, and a sovereign man cannot be controlled. From this point forward, understand this principle. When you speak out of anger, you give away energy. When you react out of pain, you surrender power. But when you stay silent out of strength, you master both. So the next time someone tries to provoke you when they push, test, or twist your words, pause. Don't defend. Don't chase. Don't explain. Just observe. Let your silence do the talking, because the man who doesn't flinch, the man who can sit in silence while the world demands reaction, that man owns himself. And once a man owns himself, no one owns him again. Confidence is easy when someone keeps reacting to you, when they chase, when they explain, when they try to fix what's broken. It gives you a sense of importance. That's why manipulators and prideful people crave your attention like oxygen. It's not your love they want, it's your reaction. Because as long as you're reacting, they're relevant. As long as you're speaking, they're powerful. But once you go silent, everything starts to shift. At first, they laugh. They tell themselves, you're just playing hard to get. They post. They brag. They act unaffected, but it's all performance. Because deep down, they feel something's off. They just don't want to admit it yet. Days pass. Your silence stretches longer than their ego can justify, and that's when the seed of doubt is planted. It starts small, a whisper in their mind. What if he really doesn't care? What if he's actually moved on? They try to silence the thought, but it keeps growing. Because silence, unlike words, doesn't fade. It echoes. See, people can fight your words. They can argue, twist, deny, or deflect. But they can't fight silence. Because silence forces them to argue with themselves. And the human mind hates the unknown. When you remove yourself from their life without explanation, their brain scrambles for closure. It replays every memory, every text, every tone, every little gesture, searching for the answer that isn't there. The confidence they once wore like armor starts to crack, piece by piece, and beneath it, they find something they haven't felt in a long time: uncertainty. Uncertainty is the beginning of fear, and fear, when it grows in silence, becomes self-doubt. Your absence becomes a mirror they can't escape. They see their own mistakes, staring back at them, the disrespect, the manipulation, the arrogance, and now there's no noise to drown it out, no argument to hide behind, no reaction from you to reassure them that they still matter, only silence deep, echoing, and merciless. The mind that once felt invincible begins to spiral. Was I wrong? Did I push too far? Did he finally see through me? Every unanswered question becomes a torment. Every day, you remain silent becomes a message louder than a speech. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that's exactly what your silence does. It turns their imagination against them. They start to imagine your life without them. They picture you moving on calm, focused, thriving. They picture your mornings peaceful, your nights undisturbed, and the thought haunts them. Because the moment you stop needing them, their confidence loses its foundation. You've shifted the power dynamic. They used to feed on your anxiety, now they're drowning in their own. They used to sleep easily knowing you'd always come back. Now they stare at the ceiling, replaying every word they wish they hadn't said. Their pride turns into paranoia. Their arrogance turns into analysis. Their confidence turns into fear. That's what silence does. It doesn't punish, it exposes. It shows them who they really are when they no longer have control. And ironically, the more they fear losing control, the more control they lose. They start making mistakes. They text you just to check in. They post to get your attention. They ask mutual friends about you. They pretend they're fine, but every action screams the opposite. Your silence has become psychological gravity. It pulls their composure apart, one thought at a time. Understand this. When you go silent, you force people to face themselves. Because the truth is, they were never confident, they were just comfortable. Your presence was their crutch. Your reactions were their reassurance. And now, both are gone. That's why silence is such a rare form of power. It doesn't destroy with noise, it dismantles with absence. It's not revenge, it's revelation. It doesn't scream, "I'm better than you." It whispers, "I no longer need to prove anything to you." And that whisper terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. So when you feel the urge to speak, to break the silence, to remind them you exist, don't, because every word you give them becomes medicine for their insecurity. Every message you send becomes a rope they'll use to pull you back into the same cycle. Let them sit in their own doubt. Let the silence do what truth alone could never do. Reveal. The longer you stay silent, the louder their thoughts become. The more calm you remain, the deeper their chaos grows. And when they finally realize they can't control your peace, that's when their confidence turns to fear. This is the paradox of silence. It feels small, but it speaks endlessly. It looks passive, but it moves mountains inside their mind. It requires no argument, no proof, no explanation, only discipline. Because silence isn't about what you say, it's about what you refuse to say. And the man who learns to control his tongue learns to control his world. So remember this. Brother, your silence is not emptiness. It's a mirror that exposes insecurity. It's a boundary that protects peace. It's a language only the strong can speak fluently. Keep your composure. Don't react. Don't explain. Don't chase. Because the moment you stop speaking to be understood, you start being respected in ways words could never earn. Let them wonder. Let them fear. Let them feel the weight of losing your attention. Because once you learn to master silence, you'll never have to raise your voice again. Control isn't about dominance. It's not about raising your voice, proving your point, or making someone submit. True control begins the moment you realize you don't need to react. That's the paradox most people never understand. They mistake noise for strength and silence for surrender. But silence isn't surrender, it's sovereignty. It's the moment when your emotions stop owning you and you start owning them. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's what your silence represents, the mastery of self. When you stop explaining, stop pleading, stop proving your innocence, you send a message louder than any argument could deliver. I control myself. You control nothing. Because when they provoke and you stay calm, when they insult and you stay grounded, when they expect chaos and you give them composure, you've won without fighting. People who manipulate others thrive on one thing: reaction. They feed on your outbursts, your confusion, your need to be understood. Every emotional reaction you give them becomes confirmation that they still matter. But when you stop reacting, when you master the art of silence, you remove their oxygen supply. At first, they'll try harder. They'll provoke, guilt trip, bait you into breaking. They'll call you cold, heartless, arrogant. because they're desperate to make you speak, to pull you back into the storm they control. But you've learned something. They haven't. The calmest man in the room is always the one in control. Imagine two warriors standing in front of each other. One is shouting, swinging wildly, burning energy with every strike. The other stands still patient, quiet, unshaken. Which one do you fear more? That's what silence does. It's not passive. It's strategic. It unsettles people who depend on chaos. It turns their confidence into anxiety because they realize they can't reach you anymore. Your silence becomes a barrier not to hide behind, but to protect your peace. It says, you can throw chaos, but you can't touch my composure. That's real power control that comes from within, not from dominance over others. When you master silence, you also master timing. You learn that not every action deserves a reaction. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult deserves a defense. You realize that peace isn't found in avoiding conflict. It's found in refusing to be dragged into unnecessary ones. The man who can stay silent when provoked isn't weak, he's untouchable. Because the truth is, no one can control you unless you give them access to your emotions. The moment you stop reacting, you reclaim your authority over yourself. That's the highest form of freedom, not physical, but psychological. Here's the secret. Every time you break your silence out of frustration, you teach people they can control your peace. Every time you argue to defend yourself, you confirm that their opinion has power over you. But every time you stay silent, steady, deliberate, and calm, you teach them something terrifying, that your emotions belong to you and no one else. They can't make you angry. They can't make you chase. They can't make you doubt yourself. Because your silence says it all, that you've reached a level of inner mastery where no one's behavior dictates your state of mind. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And when your reaction is silence, your power multiplies. You start to move differently. You no longer rush to prove anything. You no longer justify your worth. You simply exist with purpose, calm, measured, unbothered. The people who once played with your emotions will feel it instantly. They'll sense the shift. They'll know you've outgrown the version of yourself who needed to be heard. Now, you only speak when it adds value. You only move when it serves peace. Here's what most men don't realize. When you stop reacting, you stop bleeding energy. You no longer waste strength on pointless debates or emotional traps. You redirect that energy into growth, into your goals, your fitness, your vision, your peace. And that transformation makes your silence deafening. They'll feel it. They'll see your absence, your focus, your progress, and it will haunt them more than any argument ever could. Because while they're busy analyzing your silence, you're busy building your empire. That's how you win. Not through revenge, not through shouting, through silence, disciplined, controlled, deliberate silence. Understand this, brother. Silence doesn't mean indifference. It means you've evolved beyond the need to prove yourself. You've accepted that you can't control others, only yourself. And that realization changes everything. The man who controls his emotions controls the tone of every room he enters. He's never desperate. He's never frantic. He moves slowly, speaks rarely, and acts with precision. That's the kind of energy that commands respect without demanding it. So the next time someone tries to pull you into chaos, pause and remember, you don't owe them a reaction. You owe yourself peace. The moment you choose silence over impulse, you prove you are the master, not the puppet. Because silence is not what happens when you have nothing to say. It's what happens when you finally understand that not everything deserves your voice. Stay silent. Stay grounded. Stay in control. Because the man who owns his silence owns his world. Silence has a way of revealing what words always hide. When you go quiet, the noise fades, and all that's left is truth, naked, undeniable, and often unbearable. Your silence doesn't punish them. It exposes them, because when you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, when you stop trying to make them understand, they're left alone with the one voice they've spent their whole life running from their own. And that's when fear begins. See, most people can't handle silence because it removes their disguise. It strips away distraction, and reflection becomes unavoidable. When they can no longer hear you, they start to hear themselves, the lies they told, the games they played, the ways they broke what was real. They start to see what your words once shielded them from the truth. And truth, when mirrored back through silence, cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. Every unanswered message becomes a reminder. Every quiet day becomes a reflection. Every night, without your voice, becomes a conversation they can't control. They start to wonder, did I push too far? Was it me? Did I lose someone who truly cared? And that question, that flicker of self-awareness, is what haunts them most. Because they realize they're no longer fighting you. They're fighting themselves. Epictetus said, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. And when you go silent, you take away their version of the story. Now, they can't twist it. They can't justify it. They can't hide behind your forgiveness. They have to sit with the reality of their own choices. That's what silence does. It doesn't shout justice. It reveals it. It doesn't chase closure. It forces reflection. You've removed yourself from the equation, and now they can't hide from the math. They see exactly what they did, multiplied by the weight of your absence. You have to understand this. Words give them escape routes. Every explanation, every apology, every maybe next time becomes an open door they can use to avoid responsibility. But silence locks every door. There's nowhere to run. They have to face themselves. And when people finally face themselves, they see the destruction they caused, not as a story, but as a consequence. They realize that the pain they tried to give you is now living inside them, because your silence has turned the mirror around. It's no longer about your reaction. It's about their reflection. At first, they'll resist it. They'll call you cold, unfeeling, heartless, because it's easier to blame you than face the truth. But eventually, the silence wears them down. They start to notice the cracks. Their pride feels heavier. Their confidence starts to sound forced. The mask begins to slip. And when they finally look in the mirror your silence created, they see it, the insecurity they tried to project onto you, the manipulation they once thought was clever, the fear they disguised as control. It's all right there, staring back at them, unblinking. Your silence has become their teacher. It teaches them what no argument ever could, that actions echo longer than apologies, that words mean nothing without integrity, that losing someone calm, stable, and self-respecting is not a small loss, it's a collapse. And the lesson burns deepest, not because you lectured them, but because you didn't. They expected your voice. They got your absence. They expected debate. They got indifference. They expected chaos. They got composure. And in that stillness, their illusions fall apart. Understand this. Brother, when you go silent, you become a mirror of truth. And the truth doesn't comfort, it convicts. Your silence forces them to meet the version of themselves they've been avoiding, the one that's insecure, selfish, and small. It makes them realize that the strength they mistook for weakness was the very thing holding the relationship together. Now that you're gone, the structure collapses. Not because you broke it, but because your absence revealed what was already broken. That's the beauty and brutality of silence. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. It doesn't shout, it reflects. And in that reflection, people see not what you took from them, but what they lost in themselves when they lost you. Let them sit with that. Let the silence echo. Let their reflection torment them. If it must, that's not cruelty. That's consequence. Because the truth is, you didn't abandon them. You simply stopped rescuing them from seeing who they are. And when they finally realize that, they'll understand the cost of underestimating your calm. Your silence is their mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They simply show what's there, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the guilt behind the pride, the fear behind the noise. So, stay silent. Let them face it. Because the moment they do, they'll understand what they lost. Not someone desperate for validation, but someone powerful enough to walk away in peace. Let them face their reflection. Brother, that's not revenge. That's reality. And nothing heals, humbles, or haunts like the truth. They can't escape. There comes a moment in every man's life when silence stops being a shield and becomes a weapon, not against others, but against weakness. When the noise fades and the world goes quiet, that's when the real work begins. That's when you rise. Because silence isn't just about walking away from chaos. It's about walking toward mastery, toward discipline, toward peace. At first, silence feels heavy. You'll miss the sound of their validation, the distraction of their drama, the illusion of connection. But as the days pass, you begin to hear something new, the voice within, the one you ignored while trying to be understood, the one that tells you the truth you've always known. You were never meant to beg for respect. You were meant to command it through presence. That's what silence does. It strips away everything fake and leaves only what's real. It teaches you that peace is not found in control. It's found in letting go of what you cannot control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." and silence is where those thoughts are purified. When you cut out the noise, you begin to see how much of your pain came from overthinking, overreacting, over-explaining. You start to realize that most of your suffering wasn't caused by others, it was caused by your attachment to their approval. But silence changes that. It takes your focus off them and puts it back where it belongs, on you, your growth, your goals, your purpose. While they're still wondering where you went, you're in the gym, you're reading, you're building, you're meditating, you're reconstructing your life, brick by brick, from the ground up. Your silence becomes your training ground, a sacred space where you rebuild what chaos once broke. You learn to breathe slower, to think deeper, to act with precision, to speak only when your words carry weight. And over time, you realize that silence is not just strength, it's evolution. You're not the same man you were when you walked away. You've sharpened your mind. You've reclaimed your energy. You've turned what once hurt you into discipline. Understand this. When you no longer need to be heard, you become someone the world listens to. When you no longer chase validation, you become someone others seek to validate. That's the paradox of power. It belongs to the man who no longer needs it. Silence gives you that. It centers you. It grounds you. It teaches you to respond with purpose, not impulse. And in that calmness lies a force that words can never imitate. They used to mistake your peace for weakness. Now they realize it was power all along. Your silence has become a message, not of revenge, but of rebirth. It says, I'm not fighting you anymore, because I'm too busy becoming someone you can't reach. It says, I don't need to prove my worth, because I live it. It says, my peace is non-negotiable. This is the Stoic rise, the transformation from noise to clarity, from reaction to control, from chaos to command. You no longer chase closure because you understand closure isn't something you get from them. It's something you give yourself. And while they're still caught in circles of guilt and confusion, you've already ascended. You've stepped into a higher frequency, one of focus, independence, and purpose. Your silence isn't just the absence of noise anymore. It's the presence of strength. You've stopped reacting to the world, and now the world reacts to you. You've stopped explaining yourself, and now your discipline explains everything. You've stopped needing to be seen, and now your peace makes you impossible to ignore. Brother, listen carefully. You are no longer the man they remember. You've evolved beyond their reach, and that's what truly terrifies them. Because while they were busy craving attention, you were building momentum. While they were seeking comfort, you were seeking mastery. And now your silence speaks volumes. It tells the story of a man who rose, not through noise, but through restraint.